as I've said, and she's, read out that I was widowed in 2019. And I probably believe that there are so many people just like myself that the unexpected happened. It's not like, in my own case, it wasn't that my husband had any kind of long-term sickness. It just suddenly happened. And within probably 6 months, and I had moved from Akitunde's wife to Akitunde's widow without even a drop of a thought that could happen. So where do I start with my story? I was thinking of all the angles that I could come from. I don't know, Princess, do I have permission to share? Because I know this is a very, it's all faiths or, beliefs or non-beliefs that are here. But one of the things that I have struggled with in the past is trying to separate my personal belief from my talks. It's not that I don't give business talks and I can't do it, but I feel that this would be stronger for me if I share it from my faith perspective. So can I do that? Okay.
Absolutely, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to start my story from when I was living back in Nigeria. I'd already just come out of a very challenging struggle where my husband had lost his job and my businesses had to kind of take over to a certain degree in running the family. And I've also met a lot of widows that even before their husbands had passed, they were almost like the breadwinner. Now, in my case, I had a number of businesses that before my husband lost his job, they were just hobby businesses. I was living in, a place called Akwa Ibom. So if there's anyone here that has ever been to Eket in Akwa Ibom, please put it in there. Yes, I've been to Eket. Eket, we used to call it mini London because it was such a beautiful little town. It's one of the best places I'd ever lived. I got there to do my youth service and ended up meeting my husband in the oil company, and we ended up getting married, and we had our 3 children in Nigeria. Well, I had my first son in Lagos, but then I had my other 2 children. I had them in Eket. So I had the opportunity of working in the oil company at the time, but I turned it down. I wanted to, run my own business. My uncle that I had lived with during my youth service did not find it funny. Nobody found it funny, because how could you turn down an oil company? If they had written on a tissue paper, give her a job, I would have gotten a job. It would have been that quick. But I actually turned it down and started running my own business, and we were having our life. And then somewhere along the line, my husband lost his job, and we went through this season of about 7 years where it was very, very rough. But then he got another opportunity, and we moved from that place to Lagos, and we had our plans there. And then suddenly that new opportunity, that door closed again, very unexpectedly. And we were just there, and it was like, okay, what do I do? The children were in what we would call expensive schools, but now there was no job. And I didn't have any business anymore because I had shut down all my businesses. It's not like where you're in the UK where you can actually take your business and sell it, because my business had really goodwill. I'd been making millions from those businesses. But then suddenly, when I had to kind of contribute, and I won't say totally to take over, because my husband was doing the best that he could under the circumstances, but a lot of my business money was going into us keeping the kids in school and so many things. So at the end of the day, my business could not carry the weight of the lifestyle that we had. So when we got to Lagos, and things now looked bright again, he was having this job that was like paying him even 10 times more than what he was getting in the oil company. We had, tried to pick up our lifestyle again, and the kids were now in expensive schools, and then suddenly everything fell through again. And it was, what do you do now? And my husband said, and I just literally returned from the UK when it had happened. I went on holiday with my little baby girl because we had our daughter 10 years after we've had the 2 boys. So I'd just come back when everything fell through. And I was there going like, okay, so we agreed that I should come back to the UK as a British citizen, come back to the UK. He would come and meet me with my daughter. We'll put the boys in boarding school. Unfortunately, I turned up to the UK in 2008, right in the middle of a recession. So there were no jobs. I came into the UK and the UK was like, you've not been 3 years in the country. And so many things were happening that was not part of the plan that myself and my husband had made for me to come to the UK, because we still saw the UK according to how it was sold to us in Nigeria, is that once you get to the UK, you get a job, you can send money home and blah, blah, blah. And, all those stories that when you get to the UK, you realize that it's not as it had been planned. So I did come to the UK and then found out that, okay, I can't bring my daughter. The whole plan that we had initially was not going to happen that way. And so I started trying to look for a job, and my husband's looking after the kids in Nigeria. And then suddenly we had to get to a place where I said, you know what, I need to bring the kids over. He was, struggling. The kids, we were struggling with everything. So I brought the kids to the UK and then started trying to get him into the UK. Now, myself and the kids had British passports. He did not have it. And to cut a long story short, we were just struggling for a very long time in trying to get into the UK. The focus was 100% on just getting him to the UK. Anything I was doing at that time was to try and get my husband into the UK. Unfortunately, like I said, I came in at a recession, so there were so many requirements. And in the midst of trying to get him into the UK, the laws changed, and there was just so much chaos going on at that time, even though on the side I was still trying to get things done. Now, the background of that story was that in the midst of all that, he was literally falling apart. And by the time we were able to sort all things out, we had to go to court. By the time we got to sort everything out and he was ready to come, he passed away. And when he passed away, my brain was upside down. Now, I'm going to take you into a story that is extremely sensitive for me. And so even when this video goes on YouTube, I would like that area to be cut out. I just want to share it in this space. But I wanted to, like I said. So there was a time my husband's family, they were able to sell a house that the parents had. And my husband got his share, which was in the millions. And we had agreed to use this money for him to come to the UK. But at that time, my mom passed away. So we took out of that money, myself and the kids went to Nigeria. We did the funeral, we gave a befitting funeral. And the rest of the money was supposed to be put aside for him to be able to come to the UK. Now, at the end of the day, when we'd finished everything, settled down, wanted to start, arranging for him to come. And I was like, okay, let's use the money. And my husband went, he couldn't produce the money, basically. And where's the money? He didn't explain it. He couldn't tell me anything about it. One of the things with my husband, he's very free with money anyway. Right from the time, even when we were married, I used to tell him that, why are you always the guy that would take the broom and dustpan to your bank account and clear everything out? And that used to be a joke, with us. He's very free. He's always giving. My husband was always a giver. He would have given this person money and given that person money. He was like that. So he would always kind of run out of money. But in this case, he could not tell me what he had done with the money. And, this was a large sum of money. And I went like, okay, well, unfortunately, I don't have the money to bring you over to the UK. So until I do, there's nothing I can do. So even though that was going on in the background, I was also we still have to get my husband to the UK. The kids are here. Everyone is expecting him. We are out and about. We say, when my kids will go, when dad comes, I'll show him this building. I'll show him that building, and there was so much that we had planned around it. And even in the midst of that, there was a bit of anger in me because I'm looking at, we could have done this in such a short time because we would have had that money to do it. So there was this mixed emotions in my life at the time, but still it didn't supersede me wanting my husband to come over. So by the time we finally I was able to put the money together and get him to come over, that was when they turned him down. And we had to actually go to court and fight the Home Office about it. And eventually they approved to give it to him, but they said we had to start the whole process over again, which means that all that money I put in was all gone. And so the only option we had then was to just wait a bit until I could kind of get that money together. Somewhere along the line, we moved into a place where he was to come into some money, and we had decided that that was the money that we were going to use. Unfortunately, the year that he was going to come into that money, which was towards the end of the year, he got ill and he passed away. And it was a very, 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 very tough time. It was tough because I didn't even at that time get the chance. I'm grateful to God, and this is where I'm going in, is that for me, God had seen all these things coming. So when I look back, he gave me that opportunity in 2016 to be the only time I actually went home to Nigeria to have some time with him without the kids. I just went by myself. At the time, I had no understanding of what that meant, but I was able to be in Nigeria for almost about 2 weeks, and it was just me and him in the house. After that, I couldn't travel again because we were trying to reserve every single penny we had so that we could bring him over. So between that time, he had moved out of the house we were before. It was like people won't even believe he was married. People would think at that time that, he said he has a family in the UK. Where is that family? Because we had decided that every penny that we, had was to bring him over, without me ever seeing a picture that he was not going to be alive to see it. So maybe in hindsight, when I look at things now, I probably would have loved to go home every single year, knowing that in 2019 he was going to pass away. But nobody thinks like that. So it was, he will be able to come over. And so we didn't go home. And then in 2019, I was called home that he was ill. Before that, we've been sending money. He had gotten ill, sending money home to support him because he wasn't working. Sending money home to support him. All the years myself and the kids had been just doing our best to kind of send money home for his housing, for everything that he needed, with the hope that when he comes to the UK, he'll be able to, get a job and life would just be, you're building these big, huge dreams and pictures and images of what life is going to be like. And then he got ill. And when he got ill, I had to rush down to Nigeria. Was with him throughout the time he was in the hospital. He had lost so much weight. It was crazy. But at the end of the day, he was discharged from the hospital. We were happy. Okay, come November, we'll be able to start sorting out his coming over and all those dreams. And I came back to the UK in that September, only for me to receive a call. And I was told that, he was weak. They rushed him somebody called me. And then I had to call my cousin. I said, please go to the house. I don't know what's going on with my husband. So they rushed to the house. And this probably was maybe about 4 in the evening when we got that call. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, I'm calling everyone. Nobody's calling me back. Nobody's getting in touch. I'm going like, what is going on? Nobody's talking to me. I'm calling everyone that I knew was connected to taking him to the hospital. Nobody was calling me back. And then suddenly, 10:30, there's a doorbell. And when one of my kids answered the door, it's Auntie, my sister and someone else. And I just knew why are these people coming to my house at 10:30 at night? It was just them all trying to get themselves together to be able to come and tell me that he had passed away. It was, I don't even know how I could think, because it's literally looking like a month to the time that he's going to get the opportunity to come to the UK, he passed away. And I don't even know how I felt. I don't even know. I couldn't think. The kids couldn't think, because it was like all those dreams, those big, beautiful pictures and things that we had built up, that when he comes, we had visualized him, us being at the airport to meet him. And there was my daughters already, right from primary school. This is a 10-year period that we've been fighting to try and get him into the country at that time. And my daughter was like, Dad, when he comes in primary school, she had believed he will be around. I even remember a time I'd sent her to do gymnastics, that, I don't have the time to be taking her to East London, but when my husband arrives, he will be taking her. And we had all these big dreams. And then suddenly it just fell through. And it was crazy, because I didn't even know where I was emotionally. Now, what makes my story different to a lot of people is financially, my husband wasn't contributing to our lifestyle in the UK, because it was me as the breadwinner in the UK. So when my husband passed away, it wasn't from a financial perspective. I didn't have that loss from a financial perspective. It wasn't a loss where my children will miss him financially. But while we were here, I could count on my hands the number of times myself and my husband did not speak in a day. We speak every single day in those years. So when that happened, one side of it was he wasn't in the picture of our lives in the UK from that perspective, from making decisions perspective. But from that emotional, you have a partner, kids have dad, all that had gone. And when I think now, for that side of it, it was okay for me. I got 10 years to stand on my 2 feet, because before that time, I'd left my parents' home straight into my husband's home. And I'd never been independent to look after myself in all those years until the 10 years when I came to the UK with the children and had to take that responsibility. So I always respect and acknowledge that I don't have the same story with someone who just lost their partner just like that. My story is different, and I always respect and acknowledge and help people to understand that I have a different story. So my emotion is going to be very different from that of someone who had someone with them in the morning or in the afternoon or something, and then that person is just not there. I had 10 years of being like a single lone parent here in the UK, but it does not stop my emotions, because I had 2 emotions going on. I had one emotion, which was I've lost my husband. I also had a very angry emotion, which was if he had not, even 3 days before he died, I still asked him, I said, where is that? What happened to that money? Not asking him from a place of, I knew he was going to die. No, but it's just that it was still there. It was an unanswered question. And it was still there. And he still could not tell me. And from a spiritual place, I said, I don't know. I just know that there's something in my spirit telling me that there's something you are holding back. Even when I pray and I'm talking to God about things, it keeps on coming that there's something. And my husband went to his grave with that story, never giving me closure on where that money went till today. But after he had passed away, I got to hear a version of that story, which again, because he's not here, I don't know. That version was that he had told his family, because of course, where's his family in the story of my last 10 years? It's people asking, why is your husband not with you? And it came up so much during the funeral, even before the funeral, before he died. Because one thing I've learned about my life is God has given me every step of the way, without fail, a witness every single step of the way. He has always given me a witness that would be able to stand up and say, no, it wasn't like that. Every step of the way. Throughout the funeral, there were witnesses of every single step. One of the examples was when my husband came home from the hospital. While he was in the hospital, his younger sister was there. From the day he went into the hospital to the day he left the hospital, she was there to report to the family what Tokunbo had done financially. So that was a witness from the day he went in to the day he left, because I called her and I said, this is what is going on. He's going into the hospital. She arrived that day and she never left for the probably 10 days he was in the hospital. She was sleeping there in the hospital with him. And it was a witness for her family. But something happened that on that day when my husband passed away, when the family started coming, one of the family members said to me, first of all, the story of one of his friends came to the house after my husband had come out of the hospital, and I was going out to buy something, and he said, okay, let him take me there. So when he went to drop me, he said, Tokunbo, he asked me in the car, said, why is your husband not with you in the UK? And I told him the story. I said, well, because this is a very, very close friend of his. And I said to him, well, this is what happened with some money that we had set aside with the plan. And when that money, he couldn't produce it, I had to say he has to wait until I get some money for us to do it. He said, oh, now that makes sense. But before that, when the money had gone missing, his closest friend at that time, I had asked him during my mom's, I think after my mom's funeral, when I was in Nigeria, I said, please, can you ask your friend, where did the money go? Again, God given me a witness to say I had asked someone. Why is this information important? Is after the funeral, one of his family members said to me that your husband told us that he had given you the money in the UK. Now I looked at it that is some really big money. If I had got that kind of money in the UK, everyone would know I have some money in the UK, because that's in thousands of pounds. And I was shocked, because that was the story he had given his family, that the money he got from the sale of their family property, he had given to me. So you could imagine what I was experiencing. Fortunately, it was only one member of his family that actually was, I would say, a little bit raw. And I understand, and I don't want to mention that person's name, but that person, the person went for the jugular. But fortunately, like I said, there were so many witnesses that every time this person tried to come on to me, I was delivered by every witness. They will always be there. And so, like I said, on one side, I had this emotion that my husband had passed away. On the other side, I had this emotion that I didn't know where the money went and he did not give me closure in that area. But I also had another emotion that this was the information that was passed on to his family. Am I angry with him? Am I sad that he's passed away? I didn't know where to put my emotions. I didn't know if it was an emotion of anger, emotion of, it was just everything, of sadness, of love, because we had a great marriage. When I think of my husband now, I can't even think of him about the money. I keep on just thinking of him about the laughter. He was a comedian. You would meet my husband. He was the funniest of guys. No one would ever believe me if I say, he's a nasty guy. And he isn't. He was amazing. He was a family guy. He was that great. But just like every one of us, he had his weaknesses. And I was able to separate my husband's weaknesses from his strengths. I had learned that very early in the marriage, is that he held me in very high honor, in very high regard in those areas, but he had his own personal weaknesses. And I was able at an early stage to understand, and this was where I said the God thing, to separate his weaknesses from his strengths. And we really enjoyed his strengths. He would do anything for me. He literally, was attacked by armed robbers in trying to save me. Well, he actually did save me from the armed robbers, and he had cuts on his head and his forehead and stitches all over his body on the day that he had done that. He was that kind of guy. So it's another emotion that you can't really say this side of him, because this is the guy. So that is my story, and how I felt. But then one day, running my Women Elevating Women, running all these things, one day I had to stop and realize that after the 10 years, I actually was doing everything just to get him into the country. Every business, everything I was doing, my job, everything was just get enough money to get him into the country. And so when he passed away, I had to sit down and redefine. At first, I didn't even know, I didn't connect it, but it was just like everything just didn't make sense. And I just stepped back from Women Elevating Women, I think sometime last year, and stepped back from everything except my job, because I need to pay the bills, and just get myself recentered, because I realized that goal that we were trying to achieve didn't exist anymore, and I didn't actually know how to function outside that goal that we were going after. And I had to sit back and begin to redefine, what am I doing? The kids, everything. And that's where I am now. I would say I'm in the very early stages of having come out and now beginning to rebuild in the area of business, and me being the person who I need to be for Women Elevating Women in the right way, and so many other things. So that's where I am now. I'm just going to look at those questions and see if I have actually addressed anything. So how can you possibly think of moving on with your life? For me, there's the God factor. I run an event called the God factor as well. There's the God factor for me, and he has been there every step of the way. I have seen the miraculous that human beings cannot explain, but that's something. So moving on with my life, I had to sit down and recenter myself and have a new goal, because that goal for family, for my marriage and all, just what I would say evaporated into thin air, and it didn't exist anymore. And there was that vacuum that I now needed to fill and have a new, kind of perspective on what I'm doing. How does one begin to recover? Beginning to recover, I would say I'm in the early stages of that recovery, because I've started to acknowledge where I am, and actually not apologize when I step back from Women Elevating Women, not apologize that I don't owe anyone any explanation, but also I started to acknowledge that this person, my husband's family member that really came at me, is going through their own emotion, and it has nothing to do with me. And so I didn't put it on myself that this person is angry and bitter for their own reasons, but I'm not going to allow anyone to put it on me. And I would, get on with my kids. How long does it take to move on? I don't think there's a time factor, for it. It's, my husband is always going to be in our lives. We've got this big picture, after the funeral, we have this big picture we've put at the center. I literally took my clock off. It's where we put our clock, and we put his picture there. So every time, because the clock has been there for well over 10 years, every time we look up, we want to look at the time, we look at his picture, and it brings back emotions like that, So who can you look to for help? One of the things that I haven't done, and that's in all honesty, because I don't know, but for a lot of people, it would be good to see a grief counselor, depending on where you are. Like I said, in my case, I think the 10 years that I had been in the UK, me and the kids, has made my story different. But then I'm not the expert in that area. But I would say see a grief counselor if you feel you need to, so that you can speak, because they are professionals that can tell you if there is something blocking you or not. And this is something I'm still going to do. And I just needed to clear certain things before I actually go to a grief counselor, to know what, just to know where I am. Where do you find help? So you're going to ask Princess, as this, she will be able to guide anyone that needs that kind of help. Can you find joy again? I've never lost my joy in my life in anything, because I understand that joy and happiness are two different things. I've always had joy. God showed up for my husband's funeral beyond words. So throughout the whole thing, my family, my sister, my younger sister said, I've never seen how God could show up. My closest friend said, what is going on? God opened the door financially. There was nothing we wanted to do for that funeral that it didn't arrive. And this is the financial side of me, and the things that God helped me with the financial empowerment that I do, is that, it's another story, but we don't generally have a money problem, but it's not for this platform. So my joy never left me. Can your finances recover? In my case, I was already the breadwinner, so there was a difference. But what I can say to people is, everything about money. See, there are two money problems that we have in this world. You either have high expenses, that means your expenses is too high, or your income is too low. They are the two things. But that's a whole different ballgame for the financial side. But I can tell you that no matter what is going on, taking charge of your finances, it's doable. It's possible. For me not having to send money to Nigeria, to my husband and all that, made my finances recover even more, because that expense was no longer there. And I think the final thing, how do you know you have moved on? I don't know. I would honestly say I don't know if I've moved on. I can't answer that question, if I've moved on, because I don't think I have. Like I said, I didn't get closure on where the money went. That was one. And then the second one was that what he had told his family. I would not get closure on that. But has it made me upset? No. I've decided and chose to focus on his good, because even when he was alive, I learned to focus on his good. And after he's passed away, I've learned to focus. So me and my kids, we are always talking about the good things, especially for the boys. They got to grow up with him. Fortunately, my daughter came over when she was 2, so she only knows her dad as a telephone dad. And when we go home to Nigeria, but yeah, so I think that's my story. And that's, I think, what I'm sharing today, that the show must go on, indeed. So yeah, over to you, Prince. I think for me, it could be that, and this is just me, because, everyone sometimes we overthink things. And it could be me overthinking that, someone who maybe the husband passed away suddenly, they're together, and the husband passed away suddenly, and they've been living together every single day. I can't put myself on the same, platform as me, that me and my husband are only talking over the phone. And that could just be me. It doesn't make what I'm saying right or wrong. It's just how I feel and how I perceive it. Because I remember, in the office the other day, one of the ladies in my office said, when nobody's in the office, I'm the only one. It's scary. I said, no. He said, don't you think it's scary? I said, no. I don't think it's scary. You think it's scary. That's on you. That's how you perceive it. That's not how I perceive it. Actually, when I'm in the office and it's quiet, it's even better. I can work better. So everybody sees things differently. And so that's for me. So there's no right or wrong with that. It's just, I felt personally that someone that lost their husband all of a sudden is different to me, that was only, only when I go to Nigeria do I get to see him. So I've already been living technically independently than somebody who, herself and the husband probably make certain kind of decisions. But that's the angle I came from. I saw somebody's something there that I just wanted to add, talking about forgiveness. One of the things I've learned with forgiveness is about you forgiving yourself as much as you're forgiving someone else. And it's forgiving yourself that Because some people get angry, say things, and then regret it. But I would say when it comes to forgiveness, forgive yourself as much as you're going to forgive the other person, especially if the person has passed away. Like in my case, when my husband passed away, I was having questions. Someone asking me for them to be able to solve their own grief. And the person was asking me questions. And there were certain things that my husband had told me in his lifetime that, oh my God, played a huge role in the whole funeral and him leaving, that I refused to tell any of his family members till today. They've not heard it from me and they will never hear it from me because he's not here to counter it and say he didn't tell me. And I got to learn that many, many years ago before he died from someone else, from a different situation. I normally have always said, I won't talk, but this particular one incident became my saving grace for the future, where I had opened my mouth and said something that at the end of the day backfired. And it was because a group of people had forced me to say from my so-called Christian perspective that you as a Christian should say it, which I did, and it backfired. It wasn't something so big as an incident, but it was big enough to prepare me for the future when my husband passed away and I was being asked certain questions, and I had been making all these decisions based on what my husband had said to me that now I refuse to say. And I tell them point blank, my husband's family, I said there's certain things my husband said to me, I will never tell you. And I said it to their face, I will never tell you. I said, do you know why? Because my husband is not here to counter it. But every decision I've made is based on what he had told me in respect of his life. I said, so there was somebody who wanted to give me money, lots of money. But when my husband was alive, this person hadn't treated my husband to give him that money. And I said, I'm not taking it. I said, I don't want your money. Because when my husband was alive, you didn't give it to him. Then after he passed away, you want to give me? I'm not taking it. Go with your money. So a lot of times, and I'm not angry with that person. I'm not. It's just that I'm respecting the man that I love, the man that had given me 3 beautiful children. So I wasn't. So what I just want to say is that there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to have to forgive people for. But I also have taken this opportunity now. For some of you, it's better to be quiet. For some, your case might be to open your mouth and speak. I don't know your story. But for me personally, there were certain things that made me make decisions based on what my husband said. And even though family pressure, I don't owe any of you any explanation whatsoever. And I told them point blank that I am not going to tell you because my husband is not here to say, I told you or I didn't tell you. And that has given me peace, is that I don't owe any family member anything. If they, when they reach out to me, I am very respectful. I honor them. I do what I can, but I don't let anyone take ownership of my life in any way. So yeah, just wanted to add that. I think for us living in the West, we have, you come into the UK as an example, you come into the UK and maybe I can go this way. I'm in a way happy that I did come back to the UK because the UK teaches you to be more cautious in how you speak to people. And, I'm an employment advisor by day, so I'm always dealing with clients, families, kids, and things like that, where you have to learn how to speak to people, whereas back in Africa, you think it in your head, it comes out of your mouth, without you actually thinking, how is the other party going to feel? Here, you can be sued. I was on social media yesterday and I saw this young lady. She had popped up, on my platform, and she had been saying certain things for quite some time. And I've been going like, what's going on in this child's life? And then it suddenly exploded, where she went and did something that was, I have a feeling that behind the scenes, they actually have threatened her with court. But this was in Africa, and not understanding how to use social media. So what am I saying is that here in the UK, after you've lived here for some time, you start to learn how not to say certain things. But we don't have that, at least in Nigeria. I know I can't say about other African countries. I've not really lived there, but I have lived in Nigeria. I lived in Nigeria for about 33 years before coming back to the UK. So in Nigeria, people will say, now, it's enough, I think I've just spoken to you, but it's enough, get up. And they believe they're saying it in love, but at the end of the day, for us, we are beginning, I think social media and the global world becoming smaller is awakening us to the words that we speak, the etiquette. But back in the day, we didn't really have it in Nigeria. So people would just talk and everybody else would just accept it as, yes, I'm supposed to move on. I would say that we are beginning to learn to allow ourselves to see where we are and take ownership of where we are right now without apologizing to anyone. And that is what I feel should also come into the African culture without losing the respect. If your mother-in-law says move on, it was her son, for example, there's a way you would approach to talk to her. And it's just still maintaining that respect that we can maintain. But if you are in places where you can actually put your foot down, I would say speak up. And, I was speaking, training at an event some time ago, so a few weeks ago, and somebody said something that it's time for people to speak up. And sometimes it's learning how to speak up respectfully, especially if you come from an African culture where respect is still such a big thing. So, so respectfully being able to maybe tell someone that I'm not ready to move on yet. I'm just being honest and open. I'm just not ready to move on yet. I don't want to move on yet, but I will if I feel that way, and I think it's just finding yourself in your truth. If you're not ready to move on, then don't, because you are not ready. Because if you're ready, you'll be the first one to tell yourself you're ready. That's my take on it. Can I just add something, Princess, to what you've just said, what Mayo has just said? And I know it's not common for us in Africa, but I think it's something that you might have to really, it's just having husbands and wives actually discussing when we go home, because everybody is going to go home, what do you do? And this is where here in the West, it's about having a will. But in Africa, especially, I don't like saying Africa, I like saying Nigeria because I've never been to other African countries, but it's like a taboo. Now, the important thing is, your culture. Let's be honest. Every Nigerian culture, for example, your culture. You know how your culture operates. You know it. So us now behaving as if, especially on the man side, your culture. What happens if I pass suddenly? Nobody is saying it will happen, but what happens? What is the arrangement? What do you expect? If it's my wife, what is the family of my wife going to expect? Because like I said, I lived in Akwa Ibom for many years. The Yoruba culture for me was a little bit different. But I remember my mom's culture. When my mom's husband died, that was my stepdad. When he died, the family came in and they were only interested in taking everything. So I had that secondhand experience. Fortunately, I didn't have it with my husband in Nigeria because we were here, there wasn't anything to take in that sense. So, but I think it's a conversation that we need to start having more. And with platforms like this, it's actually to encourage families to look at what cultural background am I coming from? If something happens to me, how is my family going to act or react? What do I put down? Do I have a will or things like that? So I just wanted to add that. But I've also seen situations where if the woman comes from a wealthy home, where the man is seen to not come from a wealthy home, then the story can be different. Where I lived in Akwa Ibom, they could actually, where it's dangerous, if the man wasn't married to the woman, they would actually do the wedding. He would have to first marry the woman before he can then bury her. So there's lots going on with different cultures.
Sorry, Tokunbo.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm trying to process that.
I lived in Akwa Ibom for about almost how many years? 17 years. Yes. If the person had not done all the wedding rites and the woman dies, he would first have to marry her.
Who?
The dead woman.
The dead woman, before them burying the dead woman.
Oh.
So it's again understanding cultures and what to expect.
Okay. You see that the conversation has only just
Culture and the cultures of different people. It's things nobody wants to talk about because we claim it's a taboo. What's the culture of the person that you're marrying? If as Africans, you need to look at that, because if anything does happen, what is going to happen? And this is something that needs to be discussed. Is when a man and a woman are getting married, you better understand the culture of that. Princess, we in the West find it easier. People who've not experienced Western culture, it's a completely different ballgame. If a woman does not have financial backing or family backing, that's another story. If her family is strong financially, even if she's not strong financially, she has some family members that have her back on her side, it's going to be easier. A woman that does not have financial backing, does not have a financial standing on her own, she's already, just like Dr. Tom said, she could be experiencing the numbness that she can't make any decision. And so they are going to be on her. Like I remember when my mom's husband passed away, the family came into the house right there and they wanted to start taking things. But unfortunately, the things that they loved the most in that house that they wanted actually belonged to my mom, because my mom, brought them from England. So they had this huge house and she had all her furniture like in the upstairs living room, and the man had his furniture in the downstairs living room, not intentionally, but they just like for her to have her space of her things. And most of the things that they wanted, that they loved, were actually my mom's. And so when they would touch this, my mom would say, "This is mine." And they would talk, but they couldn't argue because they knew that she was a full, woman with her own life before she got married to my stepdad. So can you see, things are different? But if she'd not been like that, they would have come in that day, just cleared their house, emptied it out, and walked away. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me. It's been very interesting. I remember when you first reached out to me, I was like, I'm not used to, I've never been called in the area of widow. Anytime I'm called, it's for financial. So, being called to do this, and I really wasn't sure which way it was going to go. But because I'm a speaker, I knew, okay, once I get on Zoom, there will be something to say, and I would just go with the flow in the direction. So, but I just want to say thank you. I think I really needed to get that out as well. And I can see from our conversations that, this is so needed. One of the things I've learned is that, here in the West, it's because people are standing up to talk about something. And I'm so grateful that Africa now is beginning to wake up. And instead of us like going through something, we now have people who are ready to stand up and set up organizations to deal with. So, Princess, I really appreciate that you've done this, because we need more people, whether it's for men, for women, for children in Africa, that is no longer keeping silent, and that we fight these things. And I'm happy that you talked about statistics and data, because that is the biggest problem. This is what the West has. They have data. Today, I'm writing an ebook, and I was like, I need to put in the statistics of these financial numbers so that it really rings a bell. Because sometimes when we talk about things without putting the numbers to it, a lot of people go like, okay, it doesn't mean anything. But when you say, 80% or 90% of people experience this, and then it's just a wake-up call in people's mind that, wow, that's a large, a percentage of the economy going through this thing. So I just want to say thank you for having me. And thank you to all the listeners, to everyone with your encouraging words. It's always lovely to see that whatever we share, about our lives, everyone knows me. Anyone who invites me to speak anywhere, they know that I'm going to be very authentic. Anything that I share, it's just to transform a life. So I just really appreciate that.